Hey everyone, quick video here on looming. So I've heard time and time again from people like Rumpus and Dean and George Natchik that it's impossible for the atmosphere uh, and via refraction to act as a magnifying glass, magnifying lens, can't magnify, and it can't bring objects closer than they actually are, etc., etc. So I was just goofing around and looking up the definitions of the various types of mirage and refraction. And of course, we all have heard about looming and now super looming. But I was almost shocked to read what I came across here, just talking about the basic definitions of looming. So here we have Wikipedia looming. It's got obviously these other definitions here, but check this out. There's a different type of mirage, and is also described as looming, in which distant objects appear much nearer than they actually are. Wow. So let's think about that. So when you look at like Rob Skiba's video where he uses the Fresnel lens, and let's just go to that real quick. I can Skiba sunset's fine. Um, this will work. Do a refresh. I don't know why that happens sometimes. So when you have this, and he's using a Fresnel lens, and everyone says, "Oh, well, that's a magnifying lens, and the atmosphere doesn't magnify, and it can't bring things closer because of that magnification." Well, that's literally the definition of looming, in which distant objects appear much nearer than they actually are. Is explained in the same way as the image of the ship, except the image is not inverted. Okay, so looming is there is no inversion. The density variations may also act as a magnifying glass. I mean, look, it's right there in black and white. Unbelievable that, honestly, I'm mad at myself for not having caught that sooner, that I just didn't look up the simple definition of looming. I was trusting others like Rumpus and Dean, etc., to think they know what they're talking about, but clearly they were wrong. I mean, it says it. I mean, this is it. This is the end of that discussion, that looming can cause this type of effect. Um, it's obviously bringing the object. So when you start back here, and then it you know, you just simply move the camera back. It's bringing making those objects appear closer than they are, and it's hiding the rest of the city or town or whatever down here. And that's the very definition of looming. It's acting as a magnifying lens. He's using a Fresnel lens, which is a magnification lens of some sorts, and it's causing the same effect. So it doesn't end there. Let's look even further. So the other interesting thing about looming, in terms of the conditions you need to get it, is this. Looming is most commonly seen in the polar regions. Looming was sometimes responsible for the errors made by polar explorers. For example, Charles Wilkes charted the coast of Antarctica, where later only water was found. So they're telling you right here the conditions you need are extremely cold conditions, and basically the polar regions where it's very cold. Now it says most commonly, so you could say, oh well, that means it's not the only conditions. Well, true and agreed, but we've seen too many observations from Ranty, from Travis, Red Pill, etc., where it's the complete opposite conditions. I mean, Red Pill has a video in Florida where it's probably 90, 95, 100 degrees, complete opposite conditions of what you would need apparently to get this effect. And he's got 6 stories of a 12-story hotel cut in half. So that right there, I mean, that's just sort of, in my opinion, the nail in the coffin on looming. And then one more time, let's look at the definition. Looming: the indistinct and magnified appearance of objects seen in particular states of the atmosphere. Looming refers to the rapid expansion in the size of any given image. Okay, so talking about the size changing as the image becomes increasingly large on the perceiver's retina. When an object looms, there's an automatic physiological response to perceive the object as an approaching object or surface instead of one that is stationary receiving. Maybe it's talking about something else there, I'm not sure, it's kind of confusing. The type of mirage described as looming, in which distant objects appear much nearer. This is basically the same definition as the wiki. Yeah, the density variations might act as a magnifying glass. So the very definition of looming is that it's acting like a magnifying glass, and it's bringing distant objects closer to the foreground than they actually are. So when you see like Alkay, Olympus has image of Alkay's turbines. Anytime you see any image of those turbines and it looks like they're cut in 75%, well, it's just there. It is what they're calling looming, um, and it's simply bringing those uh, turbines to the foreground much closer than they actually are in reality. And I've made other videos about this with other images as well, and it's just obvious what's going on. Like the turbine isn't cut in 75% in half, only being another few miles away from the closest turbine or whatever. So looming does explain actually is the effect that we're seeing, and does explain what is going on there. So I could keep going on with this about the sort of magnitude of this find, and if only somebody just, and again, I'm out at myself for not having done this sooner. Just simply look at the definition of looming. I mean, I've been here before and I've looked at this, but I never really came across some of these items that just really destroy the idea that looming is what's happening in Florida and in England and all these places that are normal, call it standard conditions of temperature, 90 degrees, 95, 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Florida, where Red Pill was 14 miles across water. Um, so yeah, that's it, and it's just fascinating.